Brigand and Panther were still in the middle of a spirited discussion about the shitty flintlock pistols the squad had been outfitted with. Brigand gestured widely and sometimes dangerously with the hand cannon as she spoke, unaware of the fresh bandage she was wearing turning from white to red in real time, or maybe just too mad to care. Kez closed the door behind her. "See anything?" Panther called back over his shoulder. "Can't see shit," Kez mumbled. The battlefield was thick with smoke from the explosions. Weird refinery chemicals. Kind of stuff that had burned for days if left to its own devices. Stuff you probably didn't want to breathe, but then the pirates were beyond such concerns. She considered, staring down at the stolen rifle in her hands. A bullet'll kill you faster. The enemy was still there, obviously. The firing had been constant from the moment they touched down. Brigand hadn't shot herself, and the dead man in the room hadn't been acting alone. It was fire and chaos out there. Blood and death, honor and glory. Kind of fight Kez had dreamed of since the moment the six of them had taken up the mantle of pirates. Only something was wrong. She wasn't scared, not in the way she understood fear, at least. But her hands were shaking and her heart was pounding, and the adrenaline in her system was making her feel like an outside observer of her own body. Convict tossed the pistol, replacing it with the hand grenade the dead man had been carrying. "This," she declared. "This is what I'm talking about. How do you make 'em work again?" Nobody reacted as their comrade began fiddling with the grenade, though in hindsight this was probably the closest moment they'd ever come to death. Panther looked defeated momentarily, more exhausted from the conversation they'd been having than Brigand was from being shot. Kez stared on, unaware of what exactly she was doing, noticing the expression on sweaty Panther's face change as she remembered it was she who was in charge of the operation. Everyone was waiting on her. "Alright, squad. Sergeant, convict, we can't stay here all day. You two sweep out the doors on the right, kill anyone you see wearing a uniform different from ours. Kez, you with me. We're going right." She pushed past Kez, putting herself in the doorway. The two must have locked eyes, and Panther realized immediately something was wrong. But it couldn't upset the plan. They had to keep moving. "Something the matter?" she asked. Something was the matter. It was something impossible to articulate. The words balled up and clogged in Kez's throat. She came up with nothing. Panther leaned in close, her voice low and fierce. "When I open this door, you need to come with me, okay?" Kez nodded. Somewhere outside, a gun fired twice, something heavy. Someone called out and was silenced by a third shot. There was no quiet here. The madness would end only when one team was out of players. "With you, Captain," she managed. Satisfied, Panther turned her attention back to the door. "We go on 3. Kez's hands were numb. The air was on fire and the gun was a block of ice. Everything felt more so than usual. Something was deeply, apocalyptically wrong with the world. Something urgent but impossible to express. The universe a moment away from ending. 3, 2... And that was the exact moment that the other pipe stack exploded, bursting into a bouquet of roaring flame and jagged metal, bright enough to turn night to day. The sound was that of continents cracking, oceans flash boiling and seas turning to dust. The building rocked from the force of it, and 3 of the gals stumbled, only Sergeant remaining stoically unshaken. Everything seemed clearer in that moment somehow. Whatever had happened, the sudden violence of it was enough to knock loose the question that Kez had been struggling to articulate. It was the big one, brutal in its simplicity and all-consuming in its scope. The question all living things must answer before they pass on. Why are we here? The local mutants are calling for help. The forces of evil decided it's time to curb the mutant population and launched a pogrom at this city. They thought it'd be like shooting fish in a barrel. They were wrong. Time to enter the stage and kill all these bastards off. This is surely going to make headlines. Plus, whatever these evildoers are packing, suspicious comma, is ours for the taking. I still remember my first XCOM terror mission, way back when. In base game, there are 2 options for who shows up to fight at the end of month 1. Sectoids or floaters. Floaters have a little bit more armor than sectoids and can fly, but that's the extent of their gimmicks, and their terror unit's laughably easy. A big funny chicken who, due to a bug in the game's code, did not actually have any form of attack prior to OpenXcom. I rolled sectoids, of course. I'd get lucky on where the squad leader spawned, so I didn't really have to learn about psionic attacks and mind control until later. But there were so many enemies, so much going on, and I was wholly unprepared for the cyberdiscs. Funny alien saucers, armoured enough to be proof against bullets and all but the biggest explosives. You can't tell what way they're facing, so you never know when to expect a hail of reaction fire, and of course they can fly too. I remember running and yelling, gunfire in both directions, large rockets exchanged with the universe in general. Half the squad made it into a funny little office in the middle of town, the other half lying dead outside. The medkits I'd researched instead of laser guns, entirely useless for the troops armoured in jumpsuits, being shot at by heavy plasma cannons. In Pirates, there are 3 options for who's atting us right now, to the best of my knowledge. Option A would be rats. I'm sure we'll see them later. If it's a night mission and I even suspect rats, we're taking back off and forgetting the whole situation, though we got here in the day. Even still, the rats are polyarmed and armoured, but come with their own gimmick in the fact that they're the only early game faction that makes a ton of use of OpenXcom Extended's Spot a Sniper AI. We'll get to that. Option B would be some unusually tough humans, clad in Kevlar and armed with guns. Big ol' guns. If we get them, and depending on where we spawn, knocking 1 or 2 out and robbing them might be the best we can hope for. They are wildly dangerous, and also their camouflage means they can generally see further than you can. Melee will get through the armor, but good luck getting close enough to use it. We're really hoping for option C here. We're obviously not well equipped for this right now, turning up once again with swords and flintlocks to what's potentially a rocket and laser gun fight. But it's not going to be a goddamn cyberdisc situation. Whatever we're up against today is something we can hurt. And we do have one boon in particular I never told you about so far. All that said, turn 1's going to be crucial. Ideally, we'd spawn near something solid the girls can get behind to avoid being shot, or way off in one of the corners where the fighting's less fierce and the map edges mean there's less angles for incoming attacks. If we spawn in the middle, in the open, with an entire firing squad lined up looking at the door, it's not going to be a lot for it but piecing out on turn 1. The airbus makes for a good pillbox, but it can't really accommodate a whole squad and generally lets a few too many bullets in for my liking. Alright, I suppose that's all the time I can waste here. Show me the damage. It is alarmingly quiet here. Now remember, on turn 1 every enemy has full time units. Running around a bunch when we don't have to means playing reaction fire roulette with like, maybe 30 guys. That said, I like this building a lot. It's got walls and can accommodate at least 6 people without them all being stuck on each other. I'm thinking of moving in. Is that dioxine? Sorry, I had crud on my glasses. That's clearly a Nazi soldier sprite from Wolfenstein 3D. I'm deeply sorry to have made such an embarrassing mistake. So this is option C, the one I was hoping for. Reminds me of a story. My brother does incidental work on movie sets, which sounds fun, but it's frequently miserable work. They were filming something or other for the BBC, which meant he was working with strange people he'd never met before, and who wouldn't talk to him. They were filming outdoors during a record-breaking storm. He described being damp and cold and lonely, and just generally about as miserable as he'd ever been. And when he looked up, a platoon of Nazi soldiers were goose-stepping across the set. He hadn't been aware they were filming a period piece. It's not often you got your fingers crossed for the Nazis to show up, folks. At least they're, the enemy. These guys are tougher than completely untrained humans, and much better armed. The ones with rifles aren't up to much, they're not great shots, but they tend to weave a lot of heavy weapons into their loadout, and we're considerably more scared of someone opening up on us with a machine gun or a rocket launcher, even if they might not necessarily be a marksman. The higher ranked ones have different loadouts and tend to be a lot more dangerous. Out of all the potential foes here though, I'd say these are the most eminently beatable. They don't have the stats and firepower of the Spartans, or the AI of the rats. And of the 3, this is the only faction that's likely to start to panic if we put on a good showing for a turn or 2 in a row. If he wasn't off in the corner, I'd have gone for him. As is, we're going to have everyone duck down and let them take the first move. This is risky, especially on a refinery map. I haven't showed you yet, but there are catwalks all over the dang place above us. Basically an unprecedented array of sightlines someone could be occupying to sneak a bullet or 2 through those Airbus windows. What's going on out there? As with base game terror missions, the people we're here to save aren't in abstract. There are a ton of civilians on the battle map, mixed in with the enemy. By the sounds of it, it's not going too well for them. Ideally, we'd want them to survive, but even more ideally, we'd want us to survive. We're a criminal enterprise, not a charity. If it's us or them, it's them every time. All of a sudden, we've got enemies coming out of the goddamn woodwork. There's even an officer of some sort on the roof here. I think the black uniform humanists are the highest rank we're likely to see here, and that MP40 is the only gun he could be carrying that we're not particularly scared of. If we can pick him off, we're in a good way, I reckon. One of them came out of the warehouse looking for us and gave up their back to Brigand. They're run through in short order. The other one who'd been lurking in the corner is hidden behind the crates now, and manages to block the first swing, the blade carving a deep rut into the gun stock of his rifle. He's knocked off balance though, and the second attack damn near cuts him in half. Death, cold and callous as the blade, washes over him in a moment. The eyes turn to glass, and he's dead before he hits the ground. We missed another 100% swing there, and I've been consistently forgetting to tell you all what's up with that. If an enemy has dodge, they'll remove it from our hit chance directly, and without telling us. Generally, your melee hit chance is lower than it says it is. Significantly so, depending on the enemy. The way we get around this is by hitting them from the side, where they only get half their dodge value, or from behind, where they get nothing. Cora really let me down here. One of those, I know we're surrounded by enemies, you know we're surrounded by enemies, why can't you see anybody? Situations. Convict crosses into the building Sergeant just cleared out, reminding me of the officer on the roof, and Hoodlum takes the shot. At this range, with this gun, loaded with this much buckshot, would have been harder to miss. Hoodlum does draw the ire of a humanist soldier lurking down one of the alleys, but he turns out to have more zeal than skill. It's a grazing shot. Panther moves to the building and Kez packs herself into the back of the airbus with the others. The two of them are barely armed here, going out there with nothing but a whacking stick and a whole lot of heart each. They were part of my fallback, hit someone over the head, take their gun and run away strategy. There goes a tower. A lot of stuff will blow up on this map. All the pipes and barrels and probably some other bits and pieces. If you're not sure about something, assume it's made of dynamite. I'm seeing a lot of lasers, which we're not particularly happy about. Those will light you on fire if you're unlucky. We're also seeing the civilians fight back a little there. Rather than in the base game, it's entirely possible for our mutant friends to spawn armed, or with mutations that give them natural weapons. It's also possible for them to pick up drop weapons, up to and including a civilian wandering into the craft and borrowing the chainsaw, should they feel like they need it. It's a machine gun. Through the smoke, illuminated by the light of the still burning pipeline, the humanist heavy struggles under the weight of a belt-fed Browning with a chainsaw grip. An impractical weapon, for sure, but try arguing that with a bullet. They lock eyes, Brigand and the soldier, and for one moment she sees herself as he does. A giant, clad in rags and armed with nothing but a sword. "Why are you here?" he seems to ask. She doesn't have an answer for him. Cora steps up, armed with the artifact they'd stolen from the lab on their escape, with no real idea what would happen when she pulled the trigger. The weapon was of a design far removed from anything Cora had ever seen. It looked like a child's toy, and felt suspiciously light in her hand for a weapon of its size. There was no obvious sighting system, but if Cora knew anything, it was her way around a gun. Her hands were steady, her eyes were sharp. Pulling the trigger resulted in no muzzle flash or obvious projectile, no resultant recoil force, and almost no noise, just a faint, insidious hum. Nonetheless, in the time span of an eye blink, the fence had melted to slag, and the man behind it was a cloud of brilliant orange flame. The weapon we're using here is the Gothic ray gun. You start the game with one, canonically stolen from your previous captors, and it is categorically not an early game weapon. You won't be finding more ammo for it, but it's going to drastically outperform anything else you can get your mitts on for a fair old while. It's possible to get too good to use syndrome around things like this, but I figure now's the point where it'd give us the biggest edge and move us the most places up the ladder of weapons and equipment. Provided we can pull off a win here. In terms of fluff, as this is proving to be a very fluffy episode, we're assuming any ray-based weapons work similarly to the OGs, those used by the Martians in War of the Worlds. Favourite book of mine, a real classic. Album's pretty dang good too. Here's a quote for you. Slowly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out from it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man was suddenly and momentarily turned to fire. Then, by the light of their own destruction, I saw them staggering and falling, and their supporters turning to run. I stood, staring, not as yet realizing that this was death leaping from one man to another in that little distant crowd. All I felt was that it was something very strange. An almost noiseless and blinding flash of light, and a man fell headlong and lay still, and an unseen shaft of heat passed over them. Pine trees burst into fire, and every dry furze bush became with one dull thud a mass of flames. And far away towards Nap Hill I saw flashes of trees and hedges and wooden buildings suddenly set alight. It was sweeping round swiftly and steadily, this flaming death, this invisible, inevitable sword of heat. I perceived it coming towards me by the flashing bushes it touched, and was too astounded and stupefied to stir. I heard the crackle of fire in the sand pits and the sudden squeal of a horse that was as suddenly stilled. Then it was as if an invisible yet intensely heated finger was drawn through the heather between me and the Martians, and all along a curving line between the sand pits the dark ground smoked and crackled. Something fell with a crash far away to the left, where the road from Woking Station opens out onto the common. Forthwith the hissing and humming ceased, and the black, dome-like object sank slowly out of sight into the pit. I always found the pacey, sort of casual way he described extremely horrible and dangerous things far more frightening. Like, you're seeing things from the perspective of a panicked civilian who's aware of the facts of what's happening, but hasn't had time to process the implication yet. This isn't fucking book club, though. Let's go kill more people. Convict pops her head out and takes a shot at the machine gunner with a belt pistol. The lead ball catches him pretty square, but he doesn't go down. He's less surprised to see us this time, and his response is written in 30-06 Springfield, all over the side of the building. Unfortunately, only most of those shots missed. The one hit isn't crippling, but it does leave us with a bleeding wound that'll need to be bandaged. In hindsight, that was a pretty horrible move. His gun's bigger than mine, and if I'm going to be spending down to 14 time units with him looking, I need to be making sure he can't fire back at all. Panther's on hand for medic duties. Kes takes the rifle from the dead man in the warehouse. Hoodlum crosses over to the other side of the airbus and finds two more Nazis sneaking up on us. She reduces that number by half. Well, that's about what we've got. Oof, time to press enter again. Yeah, this is about what I expected. Most of the incoming fire seems to be aimed at civilians who spawn in places we really haven't had a chance to get to yet, so I can't feel too bad about it. Some of that was definitely at us, though, through the little cracks in the Airbus. I'm also a bit worried we're going to run out of other people for them to shoot at soon. The machine gunner's gone, but I'm not going to chase after him just now. We need a minute to figure out a plan here. Hoodlum finishes off the other flanking soldier, only to realise two more have taken their place. Cora once again invokes the invisible beam of heat, and another man's burned to dust. The girls are putting on a good show out there, but they're also attracting a lot of attention, and are liable to being overwhelmed if we don't venture out and take some map control to go along with it. Kez runs out for a peek, but sees nothing. I consider leaving her in the alley, but it just seems too dangerous. A lot of catwalks out there. I feel like this has happened before somehow. How many have we got now? Sergeant and Kara have 2 each, I think. Hoodlum has 3. There's definitely been some casualties from the exploding pipes, not to mention the few mutants who dared to fight back. Let's say another 5? We might be getting to the halfway point here. Why are we here? I've not been okay lately. This winter's been a long one, and a dark one. I've spent too long in my own home and in my own head. The other day, the weather was better and I decided to go on a little trip. This place is old, and it is dying, and that seems appropriate. I remember being here as a youth, back when I was still too small to understand the natural beauty of the place. I remember more recently coming here on long Pokemon Go outings. I remember bringing a close friend here, where we met a cat who had, so it appeared, a Hitler moustache. I remember when the river burst its banks and a flood took out most of the old paths. How we said we'd rebuild piece by piece, but time moved on and we never did. It's a silly old place that will not be mourned by many, but I feel like I've been here 1,000 times. As I wander, I can sense the latent memories hanging in the air like electricity. Probably shouldn't have walked this far down. It's just drier on the grassy bits. I think I could get too far over there. Don't know who's doing that, but he's close. Trike. It's never truly sunny here anymore. It might never be again. I remember it brighter though. The sun was out the day I rode a barge up and down the river, and the day I dived into a nettle bush to save a penalty kick, out on the green with jumpers for goalposts, and the day I sat on the grass rendering the towering steam crane in watercolour. Now the sight is a cold corpse, and therein we reflect. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told. I'm going to tell you a secret I've never told anyone before, viewer. I don't know where we're going. About why we're here right now. You have to promise not to laugh. I think this is past the dam. I've not been okay lately. I've not been okay for a while. But I get even worse over the dark months. And when I'm at my absolute worst, my brain rebels against me. I'm too down to sleep and don't have the energy to really do anything else. I've always been a quiet little thing. Often people fail to see or hear me, and when my energy's low and getting lower by the day, and my presence is so widely ignored, I feel like I'm fading away. Sometimes I worry that I was never here at all. I am a distant, blurred memory, a half-remembered dream, a confused ghost. We're going to be really thorough today, because I don't know if I'll ever get another chance. I started this channel so that if one day I disappeared completely, there'd still be something left of me. Pylon. It's not anything big or important, it's certainly nothing popular, but it's out there. Somewhere in a cold, dark room where nobody goes, populated entirely by machines. My legacy, rendered in ones and zeros. Look on my work, ye mighty, and wonder why it only has 12 views. It's here though. Somewhere the algorithm might dredge up on a good day, and a wandering mind might stumble upon. Tell him Fruity was here. Tell him I was real. Beautiful here, I always took it for granted. And how could you? I want anyone hearing this message to do a thing for me. Take a deep breath and center yourself. Feel the clothes hanging over you and the subtle movements of air currents on your exposed skin. Feel the web of nerves underneath, and through it, feel everything. You're real too. We are, in this moment, two transient spectres witnessing each other, probably from opposite ends of the planet. I honestly didn't know I'd miss this place, but my world is a small one, and any loss is difficult to fill back in. It was never a popular or important site, and the closure is of no real importance. The world will continue to turn whether or not I can be here. It's just another place from the past you can't go back to. I was here, though, once. I walked the cobbled paths and then out further into the mud, into the wild amongst the trees and birdsong. I stalked the dark, rumbling halls, observed the dormant machinery. This is indisputable, and the record will remain whether I'm still here tomorrow, or if before I wake, I return to the space dust from which we're all formed. Fruity was real. That was a fairly stressful amount of incoming fire. Some of that was laser too. Yeah, look, there's the culprit. The blue Nazis are the middle rank between regular and grey, I think. They sometimes come equipped with laser weapons, and we just don't approve of that kind of behaviour. He's shooting down from above and in through the window. I'm not entirely sure how the angles on that line up exactly. All I can tell you is what happened. Cora struggles to get a beam on target this time, melting the wall next to the guy but leaving him unharmed. Hoodlum has better luck, hitting the pipe underneath him. The spark ignites whatever's in there and the floor turns to shrapnel. I think that was Hoodlum's fourth kill today. She's putting in work. Unfortunately for her, in a moment of panic I make a rather awful move, using her last 3 time units to dash out of the relative safety of the Airbus. I was still worried about the intermittent laser shots hitting the craft. Or even worse, a rocket coming in through the window and blowing up the equipment pile this late into the mission. It's happened to all of us. Still, this could be a problem. It's a bit of a mess out there. Another one, right by us. Not what we want to see. Panther dashes by, unequipped to be doing anything at this kind of range. She breaches into the next building over, and I really hope it's unoccupied, because she's not got the range for this either. The bodies on the floor tell a story. We're here too late. Kez charges out, levels her rifle, and bounces a shot off this guy. There must be some armor there. That, or the rifle's even worse than I thought. Maybe the hit wasn't as clean as it looked. Guns in XCOM deal between 0 and 200% of their listed damage, so you can always get unlucky and fire a really, really bad bullet. Makes sense, I suppose. The world is effectively ended. Good equipment would be in short supply. Kez runs back, and Convict takes her place in the second building, hand grenade at the ready. Hoodlum's looking pretty exposed here in a too many angles way and not an unregistered Hypercam 2 way. I'm a little tentative to hit end turn. There's another bunch of pipes exploding into bouquets or whatever. Hoodlum endures a terrifying barrage of machine gun fire from 2 sides, and takes a nasty hit as a result. This one's way worse than the stray we caught earlier. She's going to be out for a minute when we get home. If we get home. Panther sneaks up behind the crates. 2 hostiles. 1 rifle, 1 machine gun. On the other side of the barrels. Guy on the right could be a problem. His back's to the wall. He might see us coming. She tails off, realizing convicts appeared beside her, messing with Chekhov's hand grenade once again. 1 on the right, you said? Hoodlum, gritting her teeth through the pain, returns fire on the guy who just shot her. It's not the greatest shot of her career, but there's no way that amount of buckshot came at him and he didn't feel it. Kara turns the beam on another soldier, starting to get used to her unusual weapon just in time for it to run out of juice. The two dash back into the building, their position effectively overrun. Grenade does its job. We're hearing a lot of commotion out there. They seem to be having a really rough time of it, folks. That's a bazooka. The plan is to split the squad into two halves, Panther leading one group and Brigand leading the other, and to wrap around the extremes of the map in both directions. There's still a lot of noise going on out there, but at this point a lot of it's panic fire and screaming. As a fighting force, the back of this humanist formation is broken. They're turning on each other out there, firing full auto at shadows. They don't know who we are or why we're here, only that they're losing. From this vantage point, it should be a relatively simple task to pick off stragglers until nothing remains. Still though, even sensing blood in the water, I'm a little hesitant to pounce. We are at the tail end of a long and eventful mission. The perfect time for a disaster. If you're wondering, in my XCOM games I normally play kinda bronze man. I play the missions in one go, loading from the start if everyone gets horribly murdered. If you turn save scumming on in the options menu and save right before you land, it'll regenerate the mission fully on each attempt, so you won't run into the problem of already having the meta knowledge of where key enemies live on turn 1. Works for me, but there's about as many ways to play this game as there are people on this planet. Find something that works for you. Does make the last throes of an hour-long battle pretty tense, though. We're pushing out on the left, by the rocket launcher man. Grouping up there too, dang, amateur moves. Glad no one's recording this. On the right, I got too scared. That area is pretty open and seems to be where most of the machine gun fire is coming from. But I'm stacked up on both doors. Kess finds a juicy target of opportunity in one of the instructors, and puts a hole in him in short order. Again, the target doesn't go down. This rifle is S. Kara's slammed a new battery into her ray gun and she's ready to go. No luck. Pretty sure the first one set the wall next to her on fire? Always nice to see the best shot on the squad miss fully 90 degrees to the side of their target. Convict and Panther fan out, tracking big game. The man with the rocket launcher. I didn't want to use the little buildings here. I do not like the look of those windows. Next turn, maybe. The instructor's still here, but he's definitely panicked. The fact he doesn't have a gun anymore is a dead giveaway. Don't know what's happened here exactly. This might be the guy we were after. I think I see a rocket launcher on the ground here. Maybe he was out of rockets. Convict tosses a Molotov, but narrowly misses. Panther could probably get him. I'm just a bit worried she won't be able to get anywhere safe afterwards. The sword and quarterstaff have proven very effective, but also kind of expensive in terms of time units. At any rate, stacking up on the door like this with the big stick is a solid move. Anyone who follows her will necessarily have to move into melee. If the lad doesn't go anywhere drastic, we'll be set to drop him next turn. No rush. Someone commented on my aggressive use of melee weapons this campaign, and they're probably really disappointed by this mission. You start a run of pirates with a lot of very awful guns and also a lot of perfectly serviceable bats and bladed objects, encouraging you to experiment with the viability of melee. In base game there's exactly one melee weapon, the stun rod, and it's rubbish. You'll be forced to use it to capture aliens without killing them in the early game, and it will repeatedly let you down with its high time unit cost and low damage output. Times have changed since then. We have melee weapons with a multitude of damage types, bonus power based on strength and skill, and the deflect mechanic, meaning that being directly adjacent to an enemy can be a relatively safe position, provided you're the one with the sword. In terms of raw conversion rate between time units and damage, melee is frequently the most sensible calculation, especially when the alternative is a flintlock pistol that'll only hit an enemy more than 5 tiles away if the planets perfectly align. In this mission, we did have to be more cagey though. No matter how much better melee is in this mod than usual, it will always be XCOM. Explosives are king here. Rockets and grenades. And this is a type of attack we do not have in our favour. We close. Cautiously. What does this mod do? The year is 2601. The Earth has been long conquered by aliens. You run a gang of female mutant pirates. Rob aliens and their human proxies for fun, profit, and power. Pirates is the biggest OpenXcom mod to date. Why was it made? Because OpenXcom is an excellent tactical engine that allowed me to create what is basically a whole new game, set in the same universe as the original, but played differently. Why are we here? Warnings! Contains some nudity of both sexes. You've been warned. Also, take note, this is not any porn quality TNA, since it's not a porn game. 2. Do not install OpenXcom nightlies. They are not compatible with pirates. 3. If you absolutely can't stand bikini babes fighting Nazis with chainsaws, you may suffer some trauma. 4. If you're looking for a tactical game that doesn't require brains, try Dota instead. 5. Read or die. 6. Contains riddles. Not everything is what it seems. 7. A single campaign might take as much as 400 hours. In hindsight, there were always some hints that this video game modification may have been made by a somewhat unhinged individual, even prior to the incident. I didn't hear the news until someone pointed it out to me in the comments of the first video, but I wasn't, shocked to hear that Dioxine was big into Hugo Boss uniforms and goose stepping. Or at the most charitable read, a bigoted, fash-adjacent edgelord 4chan gremlin who made the mod server into a safe space for actual neo-Nazis. In terms of the mod, I think the particular politics of the author are largely absent, although again, I wasn't completely shocked by the news. Dioxine's writing style is definitely of the I can't think of a joke, so I'll just write a slur instead to get the people laughing kind. Popular among boys of the edgier variety. There might be a humanist uniform the gals can wear. I've never done the research for that, if it's real, and we won't be using it here. There is, of course, always the distinct possibility that there's something extremely heinous I've never seen before. I've never gone too far in the grand scheme of a 400-hour campaign. We'll have to tackle that together, folks. I honestly don't know how much this kind of thing bothers people. Are you sick of hearing about it by now? Online discourse moves very quickly, and people seem to be extremely quick to forget about what I'd consider extremely serious incidences. YouTuber JonTron is still one of the most popular children's entertainers on the planet, despite, his incident.
Look, I'm actually not making the argument that whites should remain the majority in the United States. I'm simply arguing that it's clear that whites are not allowed to speak up against their demographic oblivion.
I suppose you try and separate art and artist. I've enjoyed this mission. It was big and tense. I got to scavenge and use enemy weapons in the field, always a plus for me. Many Nazis died. I guess whichever XCOM megamod you latch onto, you have to put up with something, right? With files, you get the insane scope and near infinitely branching research tree, an actual artistic marvel, but you entirely forsake convenience. Everything must happen as many times as possible, taking as long as possible, and any small time or sanity-saving measure the player might take solace in will be met with a sarcastic eye roll or accusations of cheating from that mod's author. 40k's bad thing is even worse. It has 40k lore in it. I'll be honest, I've not really messed around with 40k. Maybe we'll get to that sometime. With Pirates, we get the fun gameplay, but it takes the form of a big tiddy anime nightmare, and was made by someone who, should you be murdered by the police tonight, would be posting memes about it tomorrow. Maybe XCOM was a mistake, actually. The Gollop brothers would be turning in their grave right now, if they weren't still alive. I suppose art takes on a form of its own once it's released into the broader world. The original XCOM games were brilliant but flawed tactical combat sims, the kind of games where there's not really anything else that scratches the same itch once you've got the bug. OpenXcom made them run on modern operating systems, and fixed all the bits of them that flatly didn't work. Craft and map item limits, enemies with bugged attacks, even a couple of game-breaking research tree bugs in the sequel. From there, modders got their little hands on the code and went to work. The framework was fairly easy to work with, and the spriting could be done with widely available tools. Each mod that released entered into the same collective consciousness. Its sprites, its mechanics, and its essence all form the seeds of everything else that grew. The current OpenXcom Extended was built to facilitate modders, and the suite of Megamod offshoots all use the same bits and bobs that have been floating around in the public archive for up to a decade and a half. It's kind of beautiful, watching these things come about, but we do have to contend with the fact that the creatives behind these wonderful disasters are, unfortunately, people. The worst kind of people, in fact. Nerds. Show me an XCOM sprite sheet, and I see a heritage of grumpy creatives yelling at each other in dingy forums. Dioxine only the most deranged and miserable creature amongst them. I tell myself good things can come from better places, that the sprites and lines of code themselves do not hold radical far-right beliefs. Still, it makes me second-guess things. Why are we here? What energy am I projecting into the world by making this series? Why did we place our starting hideout in an Axis power? Alright, give it to me straight, viewer. How long's the mission been over? 13 of the humanists are dead by our hands. Another 7 falling to either the non-aligned mutants, explosive terrain features, or friendly fire. 2 lie bleeding out on the cracked concrete, unconscious but still alive. The remaining 9 are entirely spent. Wounded, bloody, and beaten, they finally throw down their arms. I'd wager the blue officer with the machine gun taking that hit off Hoodlum panicked him, and he was the only one left whose morale hadn't already broken. They'd told themselves that on a day like today they'd fight to the last, that the enemy would crash against them, an endless horde of barbarians, and stoic as the Spartans before them, they'd mow down their attackers until they were climbing a mountain of their own dead to continue to fight. Their deaths would be glorious, inspirational to their fellows and their cause. Marble statues would be built in their honour. In the end, though, it was a fair fight, brief and one-sided, before an unceremonious surrender. Sucks to suck. We didn't get a lot of points for this outing, as all of the people we were trying to save died horribly. We actually have to pay a tax for each one who bit it, though this is massively outweighed by the tremendous loot haul we brought home. 3 RPG launchers, 7 machine guns, a variety of rifles, something called a Hydra laser. Not to mention, with more prisoners than we can fit in our cells now, a lot of them have to be ransomed off immediately. The gals also earned a lot in terms of experience and accolades. The world will know of Hoodlum's viciousness with the heavy shotgun. On the other hand, the downsides. Convict was in relatively high spirits, even with a bullet in her, but the brainers insist she sit out a week of pirating adventures. Because she got shot. Bermudan Hoodlum is doing less well. When the smoke cleared, she was wandering in a daze, covered from head to toe in blood, her own and that of others, still clutching the shotgun tightly, wondering why nobody was shooting back anymore. We managed to coax her back into the Airbus, and from there back to Sexy Tomb, but she was substantially wounded and hasn't said a word to anyone. Formerly a warm personality, she now stares through her comrades, as if haunted by the phantom of that day. She won't be going on missions for the foreseeable future. The next contact pops up more or less immediately. There is no time to reflect on our victory. There's barely even time to herd 2 of the human peasants out of the barrack and onto the Airbus. It's another academy bus, landing in the dead of night. That all seems like a story for another time, though. I hope you'd agree. I don't know if anyone was still waiting for this episode, but if you were, I am sorry it took like a quarter of a year. I've been all over the place for the last little while, only working on this or basically anything else in little bursts. I like how it's turned out, though. It's a mess that's trying to do like 10 different things all at once, and I feel like that's just kind of my vibe. I'm pretty proud of the script I wrote, but I can see if this is too far from like a proper Let's Play for people, and I'm sorry if I've lost you in my weird rambling. I've only got another hour of footage left backed up before I have to actually play the game again. That might go into 1 episode, or it might be 2. I think I can cut it down a bit. Maybe make up for some of, this one. At any rate, if you want to rename a pirate or pick up the next new recruit we get, do tell me in the comments. We're getting to about the time where that's immediately actionable. I'm going to plug my own shit now, so if you don't want to hear that, you can just stop the video. Sorry. You can't give me money or anything, but I do other stuff, and I figured I'd shoot my shot, since these videos have historically drastically outperformed anything else I've done. Except for that weird Thomas the Tank Engine video. We don't talk about that one.
A fan of the classic Thomas episode.
I think he's talking about how bad that headset microphone is. Anyway, I do a bunch of other weird little series, if you want to hear more of me rambling for whatever reason. None of them have pirates in, and the thumbnails tend to be less successful in the broader YouTube space for some reason. I do Gamer Law, where I just pick a bunch of random topics related to games and witter about them. Those go some weird places, and they're probably my favourite ones to actually make. I also do a weird series on Final Fantasy V, where I kind of... you'd have to be there. I think it's something nobody else has done, for a variety of extremely reasonable reasons. But if you want to be part of that madness, it's out there. In between the more fancy edited videos, I do make some less effortful Let's Play videos, and you can frequently find me on Twitch, where I'm probably playing Gex 3. Did you know I'm a Gex master, by the way? Had you any idea for the last hour you were in the presence of a... I make playlists for all the stuff I do, so the various bits shouldn't be too hard to find. I'm gonna get out of your hair now, friend. Have a good one. Bye.